I've heard about your over 12,000 hours of professional development that you've put in this year for this grant. So I'm so appreciative that I'm here to send you into year 5. I will say that Wendy, when that request came in from Hawaii, that I was on the plane like that. But I have also spent some time in Kentucky, and I will tell you that there's amazing work being done. So there are a lot of local experts in the question formulation technique, and we're hoping to highlight some of them in some of our subsequent sessions with you all. I'm here with my colleague Iman Youssef, and I'm delighted that she's here. She's the person who knows where all the resources are. So she's a really good person to have. Iman, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure, just want to say hi. It's nice to be working with you all. Today I'm a bit of tech support, but I think we'll be seeing each other throughout the year. So excited to work and learn from you all.
Great. So we're going to dive right in. You all know each other. I don't know you. So if you could take a quick second and just put your name, grade, and subject area in the chat box, that would be really helpful for us. And Iman, if you can read out a couple when you see them, that's great.
I see Kathy Davis from first grade.
First grade. My mom is a first grade teacher.
Samantha Smith, teaching 5th grade social studies. Lauren in 3rd grade math. Miranda, teaching 6th grade social studies. And got a lot of people, but also 3rd and 4th and 9th and 11th grade history.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. So we're offering all of our materials, and please continue to introduce yourself if we didn't linger on that slide, but all of our materials are available at this link, and Iman can put that in the chat box too. So the PowerPoint today, there's a planning tool that I'm going to ask you to use in between today and our next session, which is in early November. Those are all on that website, and you can download them. And so don't worry about taking really careful notes unless you absolutely want to. Everything on our website, including those materials I just gave you, is available for free to educators. We want you to take them and use them. You do not need to ask for permission. Just if you're going to go out there and do your own presentations, we ask that you cite us. But we really, please take and use them. Don't worry about any of that. So we're meeting today. I'm hoping to do an interactive session where we're doing the question formulation technique together. I'll leave you with a teeny bit of homework for next time, and we'll be doing a lot more work over the next few sessions. You'll notice that there's a pretty big gap between January 19th and April and May, and that's because I'll actually be out on maternity leave. So we're leaving you in good hands, though, because Iman and some local experts will be in on the 19th, and you'll be doing work in your own classroom. And then I get to pop back in and hear all the success stories. So today I'm just going to start out, just want to lay a little bit of foundation for this work. What's some of the research, what's some of the literature about student questions. We're going to do some collaborative work together. So you're learning the strategy by doing it. And I know some of you already have some familiarity too. So if that's the case, you'll be watching my facilitation with an extra sharp eye, and you can let me know what you see. We'll look at a few examples, and then I want to get you started with just very brief, the basics of how you might go about planning your own lesson. Okay, so I want to start at the beginning, which is the formation of the organization I work for, the Right Question Institute. And this was not a think tank. It was not academia. This does not come from someone in an ivory tower with a PhD. This is actually comes from a group of low-income parents that my two co-founders, Dan Rothstein and Luz Santana, were working with in a low-income community north of Boston. This is Lawrence, Massachusetts. And Dan and Luz were working with this group of parents as part of a dropout prevention program. So their children were at risk of dropping out of high school. And one of the things that they heard from parents over and over and over again was, we're not going to the school because we don't even know what questions to ask. And Dan and Luz finally realized, okay, this is an obstacle to participation for people. And so they initially responded by giving parents lists of questions. So, okay, you have an IEP meeting, here you go. You have a school board meeting, here you go. And what they found was that this built dependency. So the parents had named something much more fundamental. It's not about having someone tell you what to ask or what a good question is. It's about being able to say for yourself what my question is in any setting or any situation. So this touched off all of the work that our organization does, which is really around how do you get people prepared to advocate on their own behalf and to ask questions on their own behalf. So it turns out this is something that a lot of academia have already been talking about, a lot of research out there. This is a quotation from Richard Feynman, who's a Nobel laureate in physics. One of the things he said was, there's no learning without first having to pose a question. This is another scientist. This is Stuart Firestein, who's a biologist at Columbia. And he wrote this book, Ignorance, How It Drives Science, which I highly recommend, even if you're not a science person, which I am not. Again, I'm a former English teacher. But one of the things he talks about in this book is, his students come into his class thinking if they can just master what's in the textbook, that's enough to be a scientist. And what he's trying to teach them is, it's about what you don't know. It's about what the field doesn't know. It's about what's not in your textbook. So he concludes this entire book by saying we must teach students how to think in questions and how to manage ignorance. In other words, ignorance seems scary, but you have to embrace it as a part of innovation, as a part of discovery, that ignorance is actually a strength. So similarly, I've read college presidents who've talked about how important it is for students to ask questions. And yet all the research out there indicates that students, at least some students, are not asking questions. So this is one 2016 study that found that less than a third of college graduates believe that they can ask their own questions by the end of college. And I think all of us in K-12 know that anything that's happening in college starts well before then. So I don't know if anyone has 3- and 4-year-olds in your life at home, but this might not surprise you to learn that a 3- and 4-year-old is asking nearly 30 questions an hour. There's a huge body of research on how many questions young children ask. There's a lot less research on how many questions adolescents and young adults are asking, partially because it's really difficult to research a phenomena that is not visible, right? So this is one study I found from 2009 that found that college students are asking about 3 questions an hour. So, and that's college students, right? You dig into this a little bit more and you find some even more troubling data around questioning. So one of the things that we've noticed is this study around who is asking questions, which of your students are asking questions. One study found that by high school, high achieving students are asking 3.7 times the questions of middle or low achieving students. Right? So the students who really might need to ask questions are the ones who are less likely to ask. There's a lot of recent work that's been done on the role of gender and how that might impact who is asking questions in a class setting. Okay, so that said, we can work on this. It can be done. We can give all students more opportunities to ask questions. So the book that Dan and Luce ended up writing and introduced the question formulation technique to the world of education is called Make Just One Change. I'll share with you, this book came out in 2011. Dan and Luce had worked with a handful of classroom teachers by that point. Here we are, we're in 2022 now. The book's been translated into several different languages, and we have over 1 million educators who've been using the QFT. The reason for that is, I think a few things. One, I can tell you that it works. I was not expecting it to, and I tried it when I was teaching and fell in love. But I think the more powerful evidence is what you see in your own students. So there's a lot of research, as I've shared, around the importance of questioning for learning. This is some of John Hattie's work. John Hattie found that student formulation of their own questions is one of the most effective metacognitive strategies, and it can improve students' rate of learning by nearly 50%. There's also a lot of research I've read now coming out of the University of California, Davis, that ties asking questions to memory and retention of new information. And then there's the other kind of evidence, which is my favorite kind of evidence, frankly, and that's what you hear from students. So this was a student who had failed out of his 9th grade English class and was repeating over the summer. And what he said was, the way it made me feel was smart because I was asking good questions and giving good answers. So my hope is that you hear this from your students, and that it becomes something that is, it just is the way that school is done. School doesn't have to be about having all the right answers. School can be about having the right questions. So that said, I'd like to get it started with you all running this activity. And for those of you, like I said, those of you who are new, you'll learn the activity through doing it today. Those of you who have some experience, I'd really invite you to watch the facilitation and share what you are noticing about the facilitation. So if we can do, I'm going to start us in PowerPoint, and then I'm going to take some notes in a Word document. So I'm going to shift us around a little bit, but let's just start together, sort of setting up the process before we move. I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of work today. So when you can either participate by coming off mute and saying a question, or you can put something in the chat box. And if you put something in the chat box, Iman can read it out, and it will eventually make its way into the note-taking document, although I might be a little delayed, because I think I have the same problem as Wendy, which is that it's very difficult for me to do two things at once. So I will try to note take and facilitate. We'll see how it goes. In a nutshell, the QFT is a protocol. You ask questions, improve questions, strategize on how to use them, and then reflect on what you learn. There are 4 rules. Like any protocol, there are rules, right? There are 4 rules. Ask as many questions as you can. Do not stop to answer, judge, or discuss. Write down every question exactly as stated, and change any statements into questions. So I want you to just think about it for a few seconds. Think about those 4 rules. What do you think might be a little challenging for you? Which rule are you going to break first? And if you have a thought about that, go ahead and put it in the chat box now. Okay, so which rule are you going to break? I'm going to move us now into a Word document. So just
I'm going to
bear with
read some
me.
aloud, Sarah.
Sure, that'd be great.
Some people say stopping to answer. We want to judge. A lot of number 2, but stopping to discuss. Brandy says writing as stated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the writing as stated will fall mostly on me today, but it is not an enviable position. So like I said, give me some grace and bear with me as I catch up with what you're saying. So you know the 4 rules. I'm considering you all officially deputized in them. That means you're officially responsible for holding yourself to them. So I'm going to start us on the process, and I'll let you know at the end, we'll sort of look at what the steps were that we went through. And Iman and Wendy can help me keep the time. So I'm giving you a focus statement. That statement is some students are not asking questions. And let me know if you can see my screen okay, or if you need me to scroll or zoom. So some students are not asking questions. I'm going to give you, let's start with 3 minutes. Ask as many questions as you can. And again, you can come off mute, say your question, or if you feel more comfortable, just put that question in the chat box. So any questions you have, some students are not asking questions. Maybe there's one person who's willing to take the first step, be brave, unmute and put a volunteer question.
I see a couple in the chat.
Great.
Who are the some students? Do they know how to ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't they asking? Do they know how to properly articulate a question? Do they understand? Does some mean most? What is happening in the classroom that students are afraid to ask questions? Are the students afraid to ask questions? Can they restate a question? How do they decide who gets to ask questions? Do they care about the topic? Are they afraid of getting embarrassed when asking a question? Do we give opportunities for questioning? Do they know how to ask? Are they verbally asking or given other opportunities to submit questions? Do we give opportunities for peer questioning? Do they think their questions are silly?
Let's pause. So at anyone who wants to unmute and add a couple questions, or if you haven't had a chance to add a question. You can keep them coming in the chat box too.
We've
can
got a
keep
few more in
reading
the
if you
chat.
want.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
How do we model good questioning skills?
Mhm.
Are other students asking the questions they have thought of? And do we let students practice without fear of judgment?
What about any questions that you have about the word some? Any questions you have about the word some?
I see, do we assess questioning? Who are some? Boys, girls? Are they forming questions as a group? I see the question some as in the number or some. I don't know if that's clarifying or someone's question. Another person asks, how many is some?
Okay, let's pause. So any last questions that came in? Or any late breaking additions? Okay. Okay, let's pause there. Thank you all so much. I'm moving us to the next step. It doesn't mean that you stop asking questions. So especially if something occurred to you because you saw something that someone else asked, please feel free to keep adding questions and we will get them onto our list eventually. So the next step of the question formulation technique is to think about different types of questions. For our purposes, we define two different types of questions. There are close-ended questions, and close-ended questions are any question that could be answered yes, no, or one word. Open-ended questions are, for our purposes, any question that requires more than a one-word answer. So I'm going to type that in here just so we're clear. So open, more than one word. Closed, yes, no, or one word. All right, so I'd like us to just take a look at the first few on our list here and see whether you think it's open or closed. And Wendy, I'll ask you to launch the poll now. So take a look at these first few questions here. Let's see whether we would label them as open or closed. Okay, so question 1 is, who are the some students? Open or closed? Okay. Can we see the results, Wendy, or do we have to keep going with the polls? Okay. Interesting. So we're split 50-50 here, open and closed. Okay, good. I'm going to label it for now open/closed, which is what I do when we can't come to consensus. What about question 2? Do they know how to ask a question? Do you think that's open or closed? And we can launch the second poll.
Hold on just a moment, technical difficulties.
No worries. Okay, do they know how to ask a question, open or closed? Let's see, do we have results on that one? Okay, 31 for open and 69 for closed. Okay. So I'm going to say the closed have it on that one. All right, what about, let's do one more. Why aren't they asking? So is that an open question or a closed question? And do we have the results on that one? Okay, wow, overwhelming. Okay, so I'm going to label that an open one. All right, so when you're with your students, you might, label a few more for our, let's just move on for our purposes. And I'd like, is there anyone who's willing to say why they think who are the some students is open? So anyone, who are the some students, anyone who said, I think it's an open-ended question, anyone willing to say why that is? You can put it in the chat box too.
Angela says you can describe them.
Yeah, yeah.
Brandy says requires explanation.
Mhm.
Amanda says which group?
Okay. What about someone who felt that question was closed? You said, who are the some students? And you said that could be a close-ended question.
Samantha says, I felt like you would name specific people. Marlena says one word. And Wendy says, if you knew it was one group.
Mhm.
Brandy says, depends on how you answer.
Thank you. So you all are pointing out a really important point, which is that it's not really about labeling the questions exactly, right? It's about trying to think very strategically about the information that you need and how likely it is your question is going to get you that information. So it's not, don't worry about getting something in a category exactly. It's more about knowing, all right, do I want a list of 12 students who don't ask questions? Then I'm going to design a different question than, I want to know one piece of demographic information about who is asking questions and who isn't. That's a different question. So you're just thinking strategically about the information that you might get. Any thoughts more generally? If you think about close-ended questions, what are some of the benefits of close-ended questions? And you can just put that in the chat box. Anything you see as a benefit of a close-ended question? Some advantages.
Quick, easy to determine if it's right or wrong, to the point. It can be a right there answer that they can find easily and easy checking.
Yeah, thank you. What about open-ended questions? What are the advantages to open-ended questions?
Discussion.
Thank you.
Variety of answers.
Yeah.
Allows students to brainstorm different ideas, to hear their thought process and debate.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. All right. Tricky question now. What are the disadvantages of open-ended questions? So any disadvantages to the open-ended questions?
Requires more DOK. I don't like know it or you don't.
Yeah.
Uncertainty could cause some students anxiety or to freeze up.
Yep. Thank you. So the point here is that Open-ended and close-ended questions for our purposes with the QFT are equally valid. So they do different things. They get you different information. And depending on the setting and the situation, you might need a closed question, right? Closed questions can be really good follow-up questions, like in a meeting when you have someone who won't tell you, they won't give you a yes or no. Oh, great questions. So closed-ended questions can be really great for data collection as well. So the point here is you're getting students to think flexibly. You're trying to get them to think about the language of questioning and to think flexibly about it. So because we're thinking flexibly about our language, I'd like everybody now to try to look at one of these questions that we've labeled. And I want to change one close-ended question into an open-ended question and one open-ended question into a close-ended question. So take a shot in the chat box now. See if you can change the close-ended one into an open-ended one, or the open-ended one into a close-ended one. And hopefully we'll have a list of several new questions. I'll give you 1 minute. So try right now, take either the close-ended question 2, make a version of that question that is open-ended, or take question 3, which we said overwhelmingly is open-ended. See if you can find a version that's close-ended.
Would you like me to read them out, Sarah?
Sure, let's add a few. We're going to add a few as new questions. Go ahead.
In what ways do they know how to ask questions? Why are you afraid of asking questions? Maybe we could see the top questions again.
Yep.
Sure.
Yep. Do they know how to ask a question, and why aren't they asking?
That's my addition. Can I get them to ask more questions? And what questions are they asking? I have one question that might be about the process. Will you explain the process of restating questions? I think that's a question for you, Sarah.
And I would need more clarity on that question myself. For now, let's keep moving through to the next step of the process. So I hope you see, sometimes it seems simple to change questions from type to type, and it actually is a little tricky. We've worked with groups from the National Science Foundation who had a terrible time making a close-ended question. Like they just couldn't make a close-ended question. So anyway, it's a skill to be honed, is how quickly can you change, because when you need a follow-up question, you need to be able to change and pivot on your language quickly. So I'm going to move us back. Let's see if I can do. I'm going to move us back to the PowerPoint now, because I'd like to invite all of you to take a look in the chat box, read back over everything that's been in the chat box, all of the questions, and please pick for yourself what you feel one priority question is. So anything that you feel personally for you, like a question you're really curious about, I'll give you 30 seconds to choose one. So read back through that chat box, anything that you feel really curious about. Okay. So hopefully you have your priority question in mind. I'm going to move us into this next step. I'd like to hear just a couple ideas you have. If you went about, we're going to go about answering that priority question. How would you do that? What are just a couple ideas you have of either the information you'd need to know to answer that question, or the tasks that you'd need to take to get information to answer that question? So a couple ideas, and you can share that in the chat box now. And think about, not all these questions are the same. So think about the one that you chose personally as a priority for you.
Catherine says, help students know the difference between a statement and a question.
Thank you. Any other ideas about what you might do to answer your priority question?
Kim says, you would ask the questions. Amanda Baker says, model effective questioning. Marlena says, model it for students. And Sheila says, lower level building questions.
Thank you. I would be very curious if you go ask your students, please tell me what they say back. I've asked them and I have some ideas, but I'd like to know what they say. Okay. So for the purposes of our time here, I just want to move us to the last step of the question formulation technique, which is reflection. And so I'd like you to think for a few minutes, and when you're ready, share it in the chat box. But just what did you learn and how did you learn it? So think for a few seconds. What did you learn? How did you learn it? And then I'll ask you to share in the chat box when you're ready. All right, go ahead and enter in the chat box any reflections that you're willing to share.
Des says, questioning is essential to helping our students to learn.
Thank you.
Marlena says, using DOK, I think that's depth of knowledge, to formulate higher level questions. Sarah says, I learned about the QFT by participating in the process myself. And Amanda says that there's almost a stigma about asking questions as we get older. We need to change this to help students learn. Statics named in class. And making sure that questions asked are open questions and not just yes or no. Make questions where students want to find answers and learn from what they find out. Changing questions from open to closed requires higher order thinking too.
Yeah, thank you. I hope, one thing I really appreciate all of your participation. Thank you. I hope one takeaway is that asking any type of question is hard for students, right? We model questions all the time, and yet some students aren't asking questions. So if we can create a little bit of space and accept the value of lots of questions, that goes a long way with students. So I think students have gotten a little too good at playing the school game, which is to tell us what they think we want to know, right? And so this process flips that. So I just want to share real quick what we did, the question formulation technique on one slide, and I have that pulled up here. So it's a very simple process, right? But you're doing really rigorous thinking. Like someone said, it requires higher order thinking to change question type from type to type. So I had one student, a fourth grader, who said to me, the QFT makes your brain hurt, but in a good way. So that's what I like to say. So as you're moving through the process, you're doing 3 really sophisticated thinking skills. The first is that you're doing divergent thinking. That's really creative, open-ended thinking. And then when you're doing convergent thinking, that's later in the process when you're trying to change questions from type to type, or when you're picking a priority question or thinking about what action steps you might take. So that's more analytical thinking. And then the last type of thinking you're doing is metacognition. And metacognition is just thinking about your own thinking. So that's the part that makes it stick for students, right? If you produce a question magically and don't know how you got to that question, then it's very difficult to replicate it again. So metacognition comes in when I asked you, which of the rules do you think will be hard for you to follow? It also comes in when you're numbering your questions and you're thinking about how one question could lead to another question. And sometimes you'll find that the priority question you chose was number 10. So it took you 9 questions to get to the priority question number 10. So thinking about all that is metacognition. So I want to show you just a couple examples of what this could look like in your classroom. And then I want to leave you with some lesson planning tools. And again, we're going to spend a lot more time on how this could look in a classroom, what it really feels like, what students actually do. So I don't want to belabor the point right now, but just to give you a sense of how the process we just went through together could play out in classrooms. I know we have some early kindergarten, first grade, second grade on the call today. So I'm showing an example from a teacher in Maryland. And this is a teacher who was using the question formulation technique to begin a new nonfiction text about alligators. So this was her question focus. And again, the question focus is the prompt. It's just what are students going to ask their questions about? And so this is a very visual prompt. So kindergarteners, right? What do they want to know about this? We have, why do the babies have stripes? And are those baby crocodiles? I'll just point out to you, there's a really interesting thing happening from question 3 to 2, which is that they are questioning the assumption of question 2. We have, is it a mom or dad? What's the green stuff? And I like question 7, I think is a really classic kindergarten question. Where are they going? And we have just the attention to detail in question 8 and 9 on this image. You have to be really, really close to the image to notice the difference in the eye color. Okay. So I'm going to move us forward a little bit. Here's a 4th grade example. I know a lot of you are working in the humanities and social studies, but This example, I think, is great because it's a pre-assessment. So it's the question formulation technique is used to try to understand what students already know about variables. And the questions are just totally precious. So I think it's worth a look. But the question focus or prompt here was 24 equals smiley face plus smiley face plus smiley face. So what do fourth graders want to know about that? We have, why are there 3 smiley faces? How am I supposed to figure this out? Is the answer 12? We've got, can I put any number for a smiley face? Do the 3 faces mean something? Do the numbers have to be the same because the smiley faces are the same? Okay, so this pretty good, solid conceptual understanding of variables by question 8. All right, and then question 10, does it just mean that 24 is a really happy number? The questions that are bolded here are the questions that the students selected as priority questions. So you can see that they figured out a lot about variables just by asking questions. And one of the things the teacher found is that, I'll put them back up one sec. The teacher found that these questions, the students knew more than she thought they did. So she actually skipped an introductory lesson she was going to do that she didn't need to do. So, and they revisit questions at the end of the unit as a way of sort of reflecting on what they learn. All right, I want to show you a middle school, this is a middle school history example. So this is a teacher in California who is teaching Japanese American internment during World War II. And she decided, this was a whole research process she was starting. She decided to use a primary source as the question focus. This is a photograph that was taken of a storefront by Dorothea Lange, who is the same person who took the migrant mother photograph during the Great Depression. And I'm just going to let you look at the student questions rather than read them to you. So just take a look at these questions and let me know in the chat box what stands out to you. Any of these, any number of the question that really resonates with you. I'll show you the image one more time too. Here's the image. So you'll see there's a real range of questions here. Yep, who is the American? Yep. And the questions, question 6, yeah. Why is there a sign that says I'm an American? Yep. Yep. Some of the first few questions, I think the teacher got a little nervous because there all these questions about the car that's centered in the image, is it a BMW? And what I'll say is, on the first hand, first of all, students ask all kinds of questions and you have to let them ask. But on the other hand, when I look at this image, I'll tell you, I want to know why the car is prominently featured too. Is there something inherently American about a car? Is there some symbolism about why this image is framed that way? So sometimes even the questions that are, seem tangential or, might not be that aligned to the lesson objective can lead you to the lesson objective, if you're willing to lean into them. And then I'll just point out question number 17. Did they ever get full-fledged justice? Wow. So I point out question 17 because clearly there's some people with some background knowledge about Japanese American internment in the room, in this classroom. And, question 17 is one of those that I would say it's framed as a close-ended question. Did they? That is often a close-ended question. but anyone with some content knowledge knows that that's going to be a really difficult question to answer. Right? You're probably not going to be able to answer yes or no. So that's another one where the close-ended questions can be very powerful. So these questions were answered in a research process on Padlet. This was at the height of the pandemic, so the teacher was teaching virtually, and everything was organized on a series of Padlets. If you're curious about any of the virtual learning tools that might work with the QFT, let Iman know. We have a bunch of resources for how to do it virtually. All right, I want to show you just one more thing. This is, I think there are some special educators in this group. And so I just want to show you, you don't have to necessarily use the QFT with an entire classroom full of students. This is an educator just outside of Chicago who used the QFT one-on-one. It was in a special education sub-separate setting. And she was using it with a student ahead of his IEP meeting. And it was the first IEP meeting that the student was going to attend himself. I mean, his parents were there too, but it was the first one he actually sat in on. So it was a very simple prompt. I have IEP goals. And again, this is one student asking questions. The teacher acted as the scribe as the student asked. And I'll just let you look at the questions again and let me know if any of them resonate with you. But it's clear to me that this is a student who needs some education around what his IEP actually is and does and could do for him, which is a really important thing for him to know to be able to advocate for himself. And then, of course, there's always the social emotional component, the question, do my friends know? And what if my friends know? So you find out so much about students through their questions, and the special educator was able to give him an opportunity to ask these questions at his IEP meeting. So it was a really empowering experience for that child. Yep, do my friends know? Yeah. I would say that's pretty powerful 7th grade question there. Okay. So we have additional classroom examples, but I want to be mindful of our time. So I'm going to move us forward a little bit here. And I want to talk a little bit about our next meeting, because I promise you that we'll do more work on what this looks like in a classroom, how to tailor this process for your students, etc. Next time. So I'm going to ask Iman, could you put that planning document in the chat box now? So all I'm asking you to do for next time is to take a shot at filling out a 2-page document. And it does not have to be perfect. You are not going to be held to it, but I want you to come in thinking about where in your curriculum could the QFT be useful to you? You've seen a bunch of different classroom applications now. You can review the PowerPoint and see even more. Where are you envisioning it in your classroom, and what would be the prompt? And often it's designing that question focus, that initial prompt, that's the hardest part of any QFT lesson. So this document is meant to take you through that. And it's totally fine if it's rough. So I'd like you just to come in with a few rough ideas for next time. And as long as you've filled out the 2 pages, you're golden. But essentially, the question focus, or the prompt, as we've looked at, you've seen a primary source. We used a statement together as a group today. Some students are not asking questions. You saw an equation, 24 equals smiley face plus smiley face. So it could be almost anything that you use as the prompt. The one thing you're not doing is using a question. And the reason for that is that as soon as you give students a question, they are hardwired to try to answer your question. So you're coming up, you're going to come up with an idea of something simple that is not a question. This is the one time. Okay. Try to think about something that is aligned to the topic. You're coming up with something simple. So a few sentences, not like 3 pages of text, one image, not 15 images. You want something that students, you think it's going to hook them. So look at your existing curriculum and see if there's, what do you normally do to open up a new unit? Like what's the hook for students? What do you think the buy-in is? And often that's where you can find a really good cue focus prompt. So the only goal between now and the early November meeting is you're looking to come up with the first couple pages of that tool. It's just an idea. We'll workshop it together. It doesn't have to be perfect. All right, so there's absolutely no right way to do it. Okay, so I'm just going to pause there, and I am here. I'll leave you with just two more thoughts. Okay, one, questioning, very important right now. We live in the age of Google, so our students need questioning now more than ever. They actually don't need our help finding information. They need our help assessing that information clearly. And then the second thing is that, I see questioning as so important for the classroom, as so important for learning. It's also about self-advocacy, right? The initial concept is from that group of low-income parents, and it's about taking charge of your learning, but it's also about being an active citizen and an active participant. So this is the last slide from an educator in South Carolina who doesn't get the credit she deserves. Her name was Septima Clark, and she was instrumental in the civil rights movement. She created something called the Citizenship Schools, which taught low literacy adults to read and write. And one of the things she said is we need to be taught to study rather than to believe, and to inquire rather than to affirm. So just leave you with that. That's what we're doing here, is trying to create an opportunity for kids to practice questioning in your classroom, so that when they leave your classroom, they are more efficient, more able to participate in decision making at every level in their life. So I hope you are willing to dig in and do a little bit of work and just do some imagining about how this strategy might fit with some of the curriculum that you already have, some of the units you already have coming up. And we will regroup again in November. So I'm here. So if you have questions for me, please stay and let me know. Otherwise, I send you off into the great beyond. I know that you've had a long day of teaching.
Thank you so very much, Sarah. That was wonderful. I hope everyone is as excited as I am over this. And I will tell you all, in your evaluation for today, I don't know why I have not done this prior to. I just had a really brilliant, it came to me as Iman was dropping all of those great links. In your session evaluation for today, I dropped all of those links. So you have access to those in your session evaluation today. So like your homework for next time, the QFT Padlet template is in there. Everything is in your session evaluation. So I know some of us were trying to furiously put those maybe in another document. You have that in your session evaluation. I don't know why I've not been doing that prior to today, but now we are on to something. So I'm going to drop that into the session or into the chat now. So make sure you fill that out for us. That is just your proof of being here tonight. And you can copy those links straight from your session evaluation. Yeah, it's all the thinking we've done. Right. We should have been asking all those great questions all along. Thanks, Sam. That's right. If you all have questions, right now, while we have Sarah and Amon on here, that would be great. I love the examples. I'm going to just say that I love how you gave us grade level examples. And some of those questions, like my word, those were fantastic. I know you all can echo those sentiments. Those are great. And I know that we'll see those same kinds of thinking reflected in your classrooms. If you put up an image, who would have thought with the image of crocodiles that you would have got that kind of thinking? And the thing that I think I walk away with is and we've said it all week. I love how our week has built upon every presenter that we've had this week. We want our students to be curious learners. And what a way to end this week is to really bring that curiosity. The statistics that you were giving about a 3 and 4 year old asking 30 to 40 questions. And then we get to college students asking 3 to 4. I have a senior in high school. You all have heard me say this. I have to literally pry information out of him. But there was a time when he wanted to tell me everything about his day, and now I'm like, please talk to me. Please tell me some bit of information about your school day. So if we can get our students to keep asking those questions, and we start at kindergarten and we go all the way up through 12th grade, that's our goal. And you all, I love your last comment, taking charge of their learning now. That's our grant, taking charge of their learning now. So I'm going to quit talking. If you all have questions, hop in, fill out that great evaluation. And this was wonderful. What a great way to end our grant year. Woohoo!
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you all so much. I know I'm very impressed by all the work that you've already been doing.
And Sarah and Amon, I will tell you all, this group, they are amazing on Twitter. So I'm sure you will see not just tonight's social media blast that they will do, but you will see evidences of their learning beginning tomorrow. So I'm sure you will see teachers that go back and they start implementing even tomorrow in their classrooms, which excites me already. So I'm super excited about that. So thank you so much.
Too. Yeah,
That's
please tag
awesome.
us. I'll be
Yes.
following along.
Yes, yes.
Twitter.
Please make sure that you all tag them. Amon has put that in the chat. Fantastic. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, everyone. And if you have questions, Iman and I are around. So if you want to you have some lesson ideas and you want to run them by someone, please don't hesitate to email us. And maybe Iman, you can put our emails in there too.
Yeah.
You just any question. Do you have any examples from this classroom?
Mm-hmm.
Ask, email us. Iman knows, we have a whole resource library online and it's all free, but it's very difficult to find things, and Iman is the right person. so please, please email. And I would say, there are some people who leave and they want to try it immediately. They'll go into their class tomorrow and they're going to be talking about questioning with their students, and that's fine. But there are some people who don't want to do it, who really want to, troubleshoot a little bit. They want to see some examples of what not to do, and that's all coming. So that wherever you fall on that continuum is fine. Get in there, get your hands dirty, come back and report to us, help everybody else. Or just start thinking about your curriculum and see if there's something that you think, oh, that this actually is a good match. And then we'll work more on it together.
It's great. Thank you all so much. And you all have a great evening.
All right. Take care.
Wonderful week. Yeah, you all have a great weekend. I know some of you all are even on fall break joining us. Thank you for your dedication.
Enjoy, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. This is wonderful.